all kinds of things. The MIT Technical Journal, its last issue, has a news item describing about how corporations are becoming wary about using computers with components manufactured in China, because apparently it's technically possible to design hardware that will detect everything the computer's doing. But of course, they don't add the next point, which is that if the Chinese can do it, the U.S. can do it much better. So why use computers with hardware from the United States? So pretty soon we'll be using computers in which every keystroke is sent off to Obama's database in Utah. For years, the military and the security system in general has been interested in the idea of trying to develop fly-sized drones which can get into your living room and see everything that's happening and record everything that's happening. Now the robotics labs have just gotten to the point where they're about ready to develop this technology. It's been hard, but they now seem to have gotten about to that point. So we can expect to see that. And of course, drones don't just, they were at first used for surveillance. Later they're used for murder. And we can expect that too. If there's a suspect, maybe a person with the wrong idea, maybe Fred Hampton, instead of sending the Chicago police in to murder him, maybe murder him with a drone. We can expect that.
Fred Hampton being the Black Panther activist in Chicago who was murdered in his bed along with another Black Panther, Mark Clark, in 1969.
And that was a real Gestapo-style assassination, which stayed undercover. Nobody didn't come up in the Nixon hearings, for example.
Now, you've noted in response to these NSA revelations of the snooping jihad, as I'm calling it, that there's a kind of generational gap.
I can't prove it because I haven't done a study or seen a study, but my impression is that there is a generational gap. What I sense, at least from discussion and what I read, is that younger people are less offended by it than older people. And I suspect that it's part of a cultural shift that's taking place among younger people, particularly to a kind of an exhibitionist culture. So you put everything on your Facebook page. Maybe it's true, maybe it isn't true, what you're doing, what you're wearing, what you're thinking. People make up fake personalities for themselves, and then they tell what that person is doing, all kinds of things. But everything has to be exposed. And if everything's exposed, so who cares if the government sees it,
Well, do you see this trend toward a surveillance state as part of this drift toward totalitarianism, or is that too strong of a term?
It's a move in that direction. But there's a considerable gap between collecting data, whatever the data means, and having a way to use it. One of the more positive aspects of this, if you want to put it that way, is that the chances are that the authorities do not have the competence to make use of the material. They can make use of it for particular purposes. So if you have this huge database in Utah, which is going to have massive information maybe on everybody sooner or later, if there's some person they want to go after, the next Fred Hampton, let's say, then they can get plenty of information about that person. And it may enable them to control or maybe kill that person. But short of that, it's not clear that they can do very much. We saw that in the past. The FBI, using much more primitive means, nevertheless had tons of data about everyone. We all knew back in the 60s and ever since that every activist organization is probably infiltrated with government spies. You saw that all the time. In fact, people pretty quickly learned that if you want to do anything sensitive, you do it with an affinity group, not even.